Hello, and welcome everyone to my financial literacy podcast, where we take complex financial topics and break them down into bite-sized pieces. My name is Carl Weiss, and I'm a residential loan officer at Fairway Independent Mortgage Corporation. My NMLS number is 263293. I'm licensed in 21 states, and what we're discussing here today specifically applies to our friends, family, and clients who reside in Arizona, although I feel the topics covered will really apply throughout the U.S. And it's our desire to help educate and provide serious value to assist our clients and friends to understand money, manage money, make money, and grow, or at least keep more of that money that we've made. Today, we're joined by Mr. Clayton Janson of Focus Financial. Good morning, Clay.
Morning.
Janson is a certified financial planner. He's an accredited investment fiduciary. He's also a registered investment advisor, as well as he's licensed in property and casualty insurance, as well as Securities and Exchange Commission licensed. I'll let Clay tell us about his SEC licenses because there's a lot of numbers there. And, one of the things, of course, as we get into things, we're going to try to get away from some of the nomenclature. Everything in our financial worlds is based on acronyms and abbreviations, and we're going to do a really good job, hopefully, today to break that down into very foundational pieces. So today is really kind of step one. We got to get a really sound foundation, right? So Clayton, my discussion today is general in nature. Of course, we're not giving specific tax, legal, investment, or mortgage advice. Of course, if you have a specific question on how something relates to you or your own situation, please reach out directly to either Mr. Janson or myself so that we can give you specific advice. And with that, good morning, Clay. How are you?
Good morning, Carl. Good to be with you. Thanks for that amazing introduction, sir.
You bet. Yeah. So tell us about your SEC licenses, because those I just don't happen to know off the top of my head.
Oh my gosh, Series 7 would be the first one. That gives us the federal, right, SEC licensing to talk about investments with clients, and then also Series 66, which gives us the ability to give advice for a fee. So that's usually what gives a financial advisor or an RIA that opportunity to do that. So investments, advice about investment Series 7, and investment advice Series 66.
Great. And again, just to keep things really, really basic, when Mr. Janson says RIA, that's a registered investment advisor. And one of the reasons that we bring this up is along with the designations of the certified financial planner, which is the CFP, and of course the AIF, which is the accredited investment fiduciary, is that you need to really understand that he's an expert in the field, and he can speak at a level that really transcends, kind of where we are today. Today is step one. And I really want people to have step one, because everyone throws around things that they hear from online and TikTok and Facebook and Instagram, but they tend to never have a foundational understanding of what the root is. And so sometimes they can talk at a high level and sound somewhat educated, and then they hit a brick wall because they really don't know what they're talking about. And it's our vision today to really help break that down from a systematic level and have a sound foundation so we can build on these topics so people can really fundamentally understand the differences of our whole monetary system and how money actually interrelates, and what it looks like to budget, and how we save money and how that money grows, and potentially even the taxation of those earnings over time. So we're going to really start today. Our first large concept is budgeting. So today's intro lesson is on budgeting, and you're going to have an opportunity to hear from two people who are very firm in the budgeting world. So on the mortgage side, I help counsel people every day on budgeting, and this is a foundational piece of my daily life. And for Mr. Janson, I'm sure that's absolutely the same exact thing, but he's working on it from the asset side instead of the debt side. And so you're going to have a really unique opportunity, I think, today to hear about budgeting strategies and ideas and concepts of things you can actually do and implement today, right now, from sort of two different ends of the same coin. So I'm really excited. And one of the concepts that we want to talk about, hopefully over and over through budgeting, is the idea of both discipline in one side of it And then there's a need versus want category that I like to put things in because, um, we know ourselves best and we can fool ourselves the best, right? So we can talk ourselves into a lot of expenses as a quote need that's really a want. And I think understanding some of that will really go a long way into filtering down to help make a sound foundation for what we talk about for budgeting. So it doesn't have to be this big scary animal. And Mr. Janson's going to help us. So, I have a lot of opinions on budgeting, over 30 years of helping people with budgets. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, so we can assist people in, building and actually using, that's the key, using it, this working budget.
Yes, I love it. So yes, I get these questions a lot, just like you do, Carl. And I love your perspective on the debt side versus the investment side, right? But I think first and foremost, I just want to throw it out there. When I use the word budget, I'm sure you have the same problem. When I use the word budget with clients, usually in one of our first meetings together, I get this visceral, just like, oh my gosh, it just feels right. It's like this bad word. It's got this negative connotation. But in reality, I look at it maybe in a slightly different lens. So I look at the word budget, and I think most people look at it as either a verb or a noun. And so let me just kind of clarify that. A verb, when you're doing right, you're actively like cutting back, right? So when I say the word budget, sometimes people think of it as I'm cutting back, I'm reducing, you're going to take away something from me. Um,
Loss. Yeah,
yeah, that's
loss.
right. It's a lot. You can't go to Starbucks anymore. You can't go out to dinner with your family. You can't
Right.
take that trip with the kids, right? That is the wrong first approach. I think most folks need to just do a quick mind shift and think about it more like a noun. Like, what is my budget? We are not like budgeting. We are not cutting back. We are just discovering
Mhm.
what the budget is. And so for me, it's more of like just understanding your lifestyle. I think that when you take it from the 30,000 foot overlook first, and you just are looking down at your life and thinking about it in a monthly sort of way or weekly, if you want to do that, I think it's easiest to start thinking about it as a noun. So I think the first thing that's super easy to do before you start getting in there and trying to cut back and dissect exactly how much, right, everything is in your life, I just tell people to go online. Most of us have access online to our banking systems, right? Chase or your favorite credit union, Bank of America, right? You go online and you go to that section called statements, right? You go to that tab and then you go down statements. And I know this sounds strange, but I tell people to do this. I want you to print up all 12 of the prior monthly, right, statements. They're typically in PDF, but I like printing it because you can put it on the kitchen counter, right? You can make it real. And once you print those up and you've got all 12 of them spread across the counter, there's one number that I think is key. Again, we're on this mission of discovery. We're trying to figure out what is my budget, right? We're not trying to guess. Guessing is wrong. We don't want to assume what our budget is. So we're going to print out all 12 of those statements. We're going to put them on the kitchen counter. And there is one number on the top page of that bank statement that says total withdrawals.
Yep.
And we all know it's the truth, right? Because when you go back through time, it's exactly what came out of the account. I'm not worried at first about what went into the account. That's kind of phase 2 of budgeting. I want to know what came out, right? The
Yep.
exact number. Now that's probably ATM withdrawals and right debit card purchases, bill pay deductions. It's just one line that says total withdrawals, everything that went out that month. And if you take that one number from each of those 12 statements and you add it together, now you have 12 of those numbers added together and you divide by 12, you actually have created your real life monthly expenses, right? On average, like you can look back at it and say, oh my gosh. And most of my clients will say that to me. They're like, Clay, I did that exercise. Not only was it eye opening, but now I know. And you can't unsee that number, right? You can't unsee what your actual spending was. And it is an average, right? And again, we're just
Sure.
trying to get to what is your current lifestyle, right? Because I
And how
think
long does
until
that
you,
take?
oh,
Throw out a number. How long is
10
it?
minutes,
10
10
minutes.
minutes,
Exactly.
right? Because you're
This is like,
logging in. We already logged in onto our phone or onto our desktop, and all the passwords are ready. They're in your password saver, right? You're ready to
yep.
go. That's 30 seconds. And it might take 30 seconds for each of those 12 statements, right? Because all you're doing is clicking and printing or clicking and downloading, right? So it's super fast. And then you're looking at that one number, you've got your calculator out on your phone and you've divided by 12 and you've got that number. But I do have people, Carl, that delay doing it because what do we know in our hearts? We know that it's probably a number that's a little bit higher than what our brain is thinking, right? We know in our hearts,
Correct.
and that's okay. That's not meant to be a judgment. It's just meant to be a discovery, right? And then once you find that number, I think that's when the real magic can start happening. And there's any number of ways you can start really kind of getting traction on that. But until you know that number, it's kind of nebulous. You're just going to start talking about, well, my grocery bill should only be this. But
Right.
is it? If you have 2 kids, if you have 3 kids, if you have no kids, if you're married, not married, right? So it's hard to gauge until you actually know what you're spending and where you're spending it. But I think knowing that number first is pretty vital.
Right. And again, I think what we want to do, what people really need to do is make this non-judgmental. This is sort
That's
of
right.
this is a
That's right.
this is a data search, right? We're
It's
just collecting
discovery. Yeah.
data.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, well, how do you get to Akron, Ohio? And the answer is, I don't know. Where are you? Right? This is
Great.
where am I?
Yeah.
What am I historically doing from an expense point of view on average?
Yep. And I
This
do
is a
get
great.
clients, Carl, that say, but Clay, that one week last week where I
Yep.
had to change 2 tires on my car. And I say, yeah, that's life. That's like real life stuff, right? And that's kind of back into your really great point, Carl, earlier about needs versus wants, right?
Right.
Replacing the tires on your car, that's a need, right? So you
Yep.
have to put that into the budget. A lot of my clients say, but Clay, my mortgage is 2,000. Gas in my car is $50, right? And my average grocery bill is 500. So voila, that's all. Those are my 3 expenses for the month. And I'm like, wait a second. Real life has all those other things. The drive-through that you did on Saturday, right? You had to pay for the kids' soccer, right? Jerseys, right? There's all those little things. Plus, there's all the once a year things, right? There's all the things that are, hey, I got Christmas bills. I've got that property tax payment I've got to make. I'm going to do that trip with my kids over the summer. So all of those one-off things get caught in the 12-month review, right? You're catching,
Absolutely.
yeah, you're catching all the small things. And it's all the real things. The only thing I tell people not to put in to the number is if you truly have something that's like that really big one-time, Clay, I had to replace the roof, right, on my house.
Sure.
Okay, well, maybe that's not in the budget. That should be counted for, though, in a savings account calculation, emergency savings, but it
And
might not.
it's not unfair to budget for that
That's
item.
right. That's right. That's right. But I wouldn't
However,
call that daily or monthly budget. That's
correct.
a side item for emergencies or home repairs that we want to save for separately.
Correct. Yeah. And so on the long term, when we talk about budgeting, we're talking about kind of a monthly ongoing living document. And
Yep.
in that, there are going to be, these, if you're a homeowner, these deferred maintenance items that are, once every 20 years, once every 30
Yep.
years. And
Yep.
they need to be budgeted for and accounted for. But that's not where we are right now. Right now, this is a great acid test to print out 12 monthly bank statements,
Yep.
the totals of all the money that came out. Because remember, most of the money that comes out from your, let's say, that checking account, that
Main
bank account, is
Yep.
also covering things like student loan debt, credit card debt, all
Yep.
of that. So it's all accounted for. So this is fantastic because this is one quick step to get to basically our entire life's expense history for 12 months and then quickly add it up on your phone, divide by 12, and now you have a monthly average and write that down on one of those statements because that number will stick with you. And it's a great first step for data collection.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. And don't make it judgmental because it really happened. And don't try to rip open every statement quite yet. Although we'll get there. You don't want to rip in every statement and say, "Oh, I'm never going out to dinner ever again." Well, that might not be the right approach either because it
Right.
needs to then be relative. Once you know it, then we start building goals around, well, how do we address it and what are we trying to accomplish? Because then you're going to get down into, hey, this is what I'm spending every month. Then you can start to really uncover, well, what am I earning every month? And you can look at another number on that statement, which is all the deposits, right? All the income coming in. And that's where you get to really see where the traction happens. I think for most people is, hey, is what I'm bringing in on average higher than that average expense? Because that's where you'll
Correct.
really see, hey, what months did I go a little bit, off of average, right? Where maybe I did have a car repair or something else happen at the house.
Yep.
But that's when you can really start to see if you have that surplus every month where you've got that little extra, right? Where you're like, oh, that's interesting. I see like I'm bringing in a little bit more extra every month. That's where the aha moments I think really click for people. And then they can get a sense as to, hey, am I running a surplus? I've got a little extra every month, or am I running a deficit? And maybe Clay, that's exactly why my credit card bill keeps building up, right? Is because I'm
Right.
just maybe I just can't quite get those averages to work in my favor. And that's where I think a lot of people start having the aha, like, here's my average expenses per month, here's my average income, net income, right? This is after 401k, maybe contributions, after your healthcare premium comes out of your paycheck, right? Taxes, withholdings, right? All those things. But once you see that, you'll start to see, okay, I'm $400 underwater every month, or I'm $400, right, in surplus every month. And that's where I think really people get to see the first, that true aha, like, oh
I
my
agree.
gosh, now I know what the number is. I know what the numbers are. That's a discovery, like you were saying.
And it starts to really sink in, I think, once you have those two numbers, because now we can say, okay, you know, what am I doing about it? And A, is it a problem, right? It may
Right.
not be a problem. Sometimes it's just important to know what it is. And then if you say, hey, I want to make some adjustments, I'd like to save a little more, then great. Now that we have the numbers, now we can boil down those expenses from those bank statements a little more and say, what are the categories and which categories are you willing to modify? uh, and change things around maybe to use that to save more money, right? And so we're going to get there. And so I think, a lot of times we have this thing where clients kind of come into this, for me, mostly with the credit card notion, right? So, hey, I want to get rid of these credit cards, right? This is a
Yeah.
ongoing thing. And, if anybody has looked at their actual statement, whether you pay it off every month or not, Citibank just came out and said the average credit card APR is 24.99%. And people right now are probably like, Carl, you're out of your mind. It is not 25%. No, it's 24.99, but on
Yeah.
average. But look at your statement and you will be shocked if you
Yeah.
pay it off every month, because if you pay it off every month, of course, you're paying zero in interest. But take a look at it anyway, because it's important to know that, many people can't and are not able to pay it off every month and start feeling more and more behind. And so that's kind of that low-hanging fruit of, hey, let's get rid of this credit card debt, Carl. Like, how do we do that? So how do you balance, people that maybe want to kind of do both? Like, hey, we have this surplus, we have extra money, we're not going negative every month, but we want to pay off some debt. And kind of want to also save some money or invest some money. Um, what are your approaches on that?
Yep, I love that idea. I'm a huge fan. I call it the double dip, right? We want to try to accomplish two things at one time. Although sometimes I think with savers and investors and clients in general, it's hard to get your head wrapped around one. But I think if we can help, people, Carl, really kind of see that opportunity, you can do both at one time. For the debt side, I always like. I'm a pretty traditional guy when it comes to this. It's a math equation for me. So I like to look. You were just mentioning that 24.99%, right, interest rate. If somebody has two or three credit cards and one of them's that 24.99, 24.99% interest, we want to find that highest interest right credit card and start attacking that first. So if you've got that surplus every month where hey, yes, I've got $400, $500, $600 extra every month,
Mhm.
that's usually the one we want to attack first because it's the one creating the most pain.
Okay.
We want to start attacking that first. I will make an exception to that, though. I think there is some psychological benefit. If somebody does have that third credit card and maybe it's only got like $500 or $600 of debt left on it, there
Mhm.
is something magical when people get traction on paying off debt. So we might actually try to use some of the funds to take down the 24.99% one. But if there's that small balance one, and even if it's 14.99%, we might go for a quick win, right? Because I think once people start to see the process working in their favor, it's so powerful. And so I encourage
Yes.
people, yeah, look for those easy wins because it gives you momentum to stick with it. If you don't get some of those wins pretty quick, in some ways it's like dieting or losing weight, right? When you see the results happening,
Yep.
it's really, really motivational and you can start really getting behind it. If you don't see results right off the bat, um, sometimes people get jaded with it, right? So seeing it is believing it for sure. When we talk about double dipping, though, if we can start attacking some of that at the same time, putting away a little bit extra for the future, right? And I think when again, it's these wins. We want people to see all my money's not just going to my debt payoff. Although you could make an argument that that would be mathematically sound. I want people to see you can also take another couple $100 out of this surplus every month that we found and start putting that away. And I think the first no-brainer spot is to start building up that savings account. And I know people say, Clay, I know I'm supposed to do that, but it's just really hard. And I say to them, you know, it's funny when you do it that way, when you're paying down debt and you're building up the savings account and you're doing both at the same time, I tend to see people very successfully then not let the debt come back because
Correct.
they see what's happening. And that extra bucket as they're building up that savings, the next time they have a tire go flat on them, by the way, we're talking a lot about flat tires. But when they see that next tire go flat, they don't put it on the credit card that they're attacking. They take it from the savings account.
Exactly
And then
right.
these lights start going off on the top of their head. They're like, I get it now. I'm paying down the debt at the same time I'm building up my savings account. And then when I do that and that really live curveball comes in, you know, a month or two after we start this process, they can address the emergency right bill with that savings account. And they're like, oh, the lights go off. And they're like, I get it now. I'm not just adding it to the credit card that I was attacking and losing traction on that. I'm taking it from the savings, which is exactly what you're supposed to do in those moments, right? You're supposed to kind of have that pressure release for some of those emergencies. So I think that's a great
100%.
combination.
Yeah,
Yeah, do it
100%
both at
agree.
the same time.
And I think that we need to underscore this idea that this is both a math problem and also an emotional problem,
Yes.
because the
Yep.
emotions and the feelings of this, as you mentioned, and I've seen that to be the case too, when you
Yep.
make progress, and progress is normally defined by paying something off, not down, but
That's
off.
right. That's right.
That creates that positive feedback loop to keep going. And just, and you mentioned it, but I'll underscore on, like, on the personal weight loss side of the world, right?
Yep.
It's the same thing. If you start getting if you're doing something and it's working, you're going to tend to keep doing it, right?
Yep.
And I think that that takes you down this path of balancing how does it feel versus how does it look. And you're absolutely right. When you do both sides of the equation, when you're paying down some debt and adding to savings, then you eliminate that possibility of putting yourself into a tight corner, which I've seen people like they get very they buy in and they put all the money towards the
Yep.
debt, and they're going hard and they're working hard and they're working more hours and they're getting overtime and they're putting every dime towards debt, and then the tire goes flat and they have no option
That's right.
except to put it back on credit.
And
And
then it's
boy, does
just,
that let the air out of the balloon,
it
right?
does.
The
Yep.
feeling of defeat. And oftentimes that just causes people to quit.
They're jaded.
They're
Yep.
done. They're like, I've worked so hard to get here, and then I just literally reversed course and added all this money back to the credit card that I've been busting my hump to get rid of,
Yep.
and it's defeating.
Yep.
And so I love it. You've got to have some dry powder because life is going to happen,
That's right.
right?
And that's a little comment about the dry powder. That was a totally agree with that. And I always also mention to people, it is hard creating that dry powder, creating that savings account, right, Carl? Because it's
Mhm.
frankly attached. Everything's electronically attached to an app at our bank, and we're like staring at it, and we're getting some traction. But man, that savings account is one swipe away from going back into my checking account, so I can do something fun this weekend. So a little tip, a little pro tip I share with people is if you're going to do this double dip, if you're going to be paying down debt and creating a savings account and giving yourself that room to kind of see both of these things come to fruition, I do tell people maybe go to a different bank
Yep.
where you can create that savings account. And let me repeat that: a different bank,
Yeah,
not a different,
let's
not
jump
a
into
different.
that deep. I want to do that on our next segment.
Oh
Let's
yeah,
kind of
my
go
pleasure.
through a couple of those strategies, and I think we can hit that a little harder because I have some personal feelings on that as well
Yep, let's
that
do.
mirror your thoughts. And so this is probably a really good jumping off place for our first segment. So stick with us as we continue on segment two here in just a moment.